Mr. Speaker, the previous speeches have more focused on the ground level, in fact to the people themselves. I, on the other hand, will be trying to bring it up to more principle level, looking at it on a more global scale, a more bigger scale. But before I do that, let me first tackle the extension, or whatever extension that came out from the 6 minute onwards from Naresh's speech. Because firstly, he brought up the example where it is wrong to actually fund the military, especially when it provides, when it causes some form of harm to the country. And he brought up examples such as Thailand. We don't think that that has any place in the debate, as I said earlier in my QI. Because firstly, Thailand is in a stage where there is a military coup and basically democracy does not exist there. So we think that, as Charlene mentioned, in Western liberal democracies, that does not have any place in this debate. He also talked about how the policy will actually improve education and the taxes will be channeled into other areas. We think that education and what other areas in healthcare really isn't that much of an issue in first world democracies, especially when we see that having this security of the first world democracies, the government views the security as important, and the taxpayers' money should be used for that, for the security. We think that that should be the way the taxpayers the money should be used, because we think that taxpayers, it is a fact that taxpayers' money should be used for that benefit of the country. And if war, to address a threat, war as the last resort to address a threat to that country, is for the benefit of the country, is for the benefit of the citizens, we think that in principle that taxpayers' money should be used. Now let me talk about my two extensions, because firstly I'll be talking about the nature of these taxes, why it is so important to the country and it should not be undermined. And secondly, I'll be talking about how support for military forces in first world democracies is so tantamount. It's tantamount to ensuring global peace as a whole. So firstly, let me look at the nature of these taxes. Basically, we see that why does anyone is required to pay taxes? Because firstly, we see that it's a civil duty as citizens, because they have a requirement. We believe that in principle, they have a requirement to give back to their country and to ensure that their country progresses. And society progresses, because it has taken good care, hold on sir, and provided for that person. But when you implement this policy, what you're doing is you're essentially hindering that process. When you're not providing support for the army to provide security for the country, you are not giving back to your country, you're not fulfilling that civil duty as a citizen, because you are shortchanging the country, and you are specifically the armed forces which has protected the citizen until now. If the army cannot function without funding, security is compromised. And we think that is detrimental to the country as a whole, especially to first world democracies, where security is important due to the threat of other possible dictatorships and other crazy regimes in third world countries. So before I move on, yes sir.
You say progress, however, we believe that normal everyday citizens should have say in which direction the country is going.
Now, okay, as I mentioned earlier in my QI, the citizens do have a say in this first world democracies, because when they elect the government, basically the government, through the democratic process, the government is basically saying, hey, we'll use your money this way, and that is why you should elect me. And because I have what other abilities to run the country and whatnot, that is why you elect me, and that is why the citizens, fully aware of how the government will use their funding, elects their government, and that's how the democratic process works. If the government chooses to stray from that path, then when election time comes, a new government will be elected. It is as simple as that. Now on to the second level of how, on the nature of these taxes, because essentially what you're doing, the second reason you must pay these taxes is to support the government that you elected. Because when you are specifying that, hey, I don't want these taxes, after I've elected you, I want these taxes to be used a certain way, you change your mind, you're essentially undermining the government's ability to run the country effectively. Because when you elect the government through the democratic process, as I mentioned earlier, you trust the government with your life, you trust their government with your way of life, trust the government's ability to lead the country effectively and to spend your money well and to ensure that the country progresses. That if that government you elect, because you believe that they are more capable than you, and thinks that their taxes should be channeled into armed forces to ensure the security of the country, because they are more capable, and you realize that they would be able to lead the country more effectively. That's why you elected them in the first place. If they think it should be used for the security of the country, then you should not undermine their abilities and degrade your trust that you have placed in them in the first place. Because when you do that, you are saying that you do not trust the government that you have elected. It defeats the whole purpose of democracy and undermines their ability to implement policies that are essentially for the benefit of their country. Because if a government cannot rule a country effectively, basically we think there is something that is wrong, and there will be major harms for it, because of course the citizen government trust would be undermined. Now let us look at the global scale, especially when you talk about first world democracies. If, for example, you look at the US in particular, where it's a symbol of peace and democracy, that one country is capable enough of effecting global change. Through what? Through the use of its security, through the use of its armed forces. We think that it's even more important that the citizens support their army through funding, because especially when first world democracies make up the bulk of global military organizations, for example NATO and the UN, we think that these citizens are probably the most well off in the world, and their duty is even more important, because not only to ensure the citizens, to ensure the safety of themselves and the nation as a whole, to ensure the safety of the global community as a whole. Because you must realize that their harms that were brought up in Shirley's speech basically is irrelevant, because most of the armies in these first world democracies are volunteer armies. They think it is honorable to serve in the army. They think it is correct, and they should not only protect their country, but protect the world at large. Because and in that sense, it is necessary for the citizens to provide funding. Because when you remove that funding, even if it's just a little bit of their taxes being channeled into other areas, we think that essentially is an issue. Because especially when countries such as the US are trillions in dollars of debt and are trying to maximize their income in the form of taxpayers' money and fighting a war on two fronts, we think that it is necessary that the taxpayers' monies are used effectively and channeled into the proper sources and channeled into security, and that is why this motion must fall. Thank you.